What is up, guys? We usually don't drop episodes at this late, or we usually don't drop three in a day. But man, the breaking news here and the potential ramifications of this topic was too much not to drop an episode, man. We got Texas and Oklahoma apparently reaching out, Brandon, to the SEC about joining the conference. The Houston Chronicle, Brent I think it's Zerwern. I don't know. ZWERN Z-Man. We're gonna call him Brent and Z-Man from the Houston Chronicle. Jesus Christ. Brent McMurphy, though, is who I'm gonna also credit. That it's going to take some time, but there is interest on both sides, and that the Big 12 source added that it was inevitable.
Yeah.
And the SEC bylaws state that 11 of the 14 schools have to also accept this or extend the invite to both Texas and Oklahoma. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey said that, quote, somebody dropped a report from unnamed people and that the SEC is focused on the 2021 season. The quote from the Longhorns was also vague. Quote, speculation swirls around college athletics. We do not want to address these rumors or speculation. That's like blowing on a fire and making that expand. That doesn't help. And then Oklahoma, didn't really offer anything. But then, Brandon, Oklahoma State comes out with the statement and says, quote, that they would be gravely disappointed in both Texas and Oklahoma.
You're not mad, dude. They're just disappointed. It's okay.
So, Brandon, this is why we have this episode right now. Texas and Oklahoma possibly joining the SEC. Before we get into a few little questions we have for this episode, what are your initial takeaways here? And, man, what a change could this be?
Yeah, it would be nuts. So my first takeaway is the SEC should absolutely do everything in their power to let this happen. 100% just because Texas is going to bring like half of the revenue. Because Texas has so much money. They make so much money. And I know Alabama brings in a lot of money. I know LSU brings in a ton of money. Georgia, Florida. I mean, every SEC school does. But I believe Texas will bring in the most money out of any school in the SEC. So absolutely for that reason. Same sort of thing for Oklahoma. I think they'd still bring in a good bit. Not nearly as much as Texas. Maybe not as much as Alabama or some of the other schools in the SEC, but they're still bringing a lot of money with them. And on the other hand, what's going to happen to the Big 12? That's my big question here. If Texas and Oklahoma both move on to the SEC, number one, that leaves eight teams in the Big 12 in football, which not great. Number two, I don't know if they'd be able to support themselves financially unless they were like a lower tier conference, unless they were a group of six conference, I guess, because all of their money is leaving when Texas and Oklahoma leaves. That's just the way it's always been. Historically, those two programs have brought in the most money. They've been the most successful. So who's the moneymaker now? Zach, you mentioned to me earlier that maybe they try to reach out to SMU and maybe they try to reach out to Boise State and BYU and see if they'd be interested in joining. None of those programs are going to replace that money. I still don't think – honestly, you take out those two teams, if you take out Texas and Oklahoma, does this not kind of seem – and I know I might piss people off – does that not kind of seem like a group of five conference to you? Because now who do they have? They have TCU, who was group of five like 10 seasons ago. They have
Kansas State, who has one of the lowest winning percentages in college football history.
You
got Kansas, who is the worst college football program in the country.
Texas Tech. The face of the conference is going to be Iowa State. So let that one sink in for a second. That's not great. I don't know, man. This seems like a dream come true for the SEC. And for me in general, just because I get to see LSU whoop up on Texas every season if this happens. And number two, just a nightmare for anybody. It's a fan of – well, maybe it's not a nightmare for the fans of other teams in the Big 12. Maybe this is kind of their dream come true too. But for the Big 12 in general, I think this is a nightmare.
Oh man, it for the Big 12, this is like hit the panic button, figure out something to keep this together because I mean, like you said, if you lose Oklahoma and Texas, it's over for the Big 12. Yes, you can recruit other people. So what I think is going to happen, Brandon, is if this happens, I think you're going to see like a power four, but the four is going to be like four super conferences. So what will happen is that ACC and the Big Ten are going to like grab as many Big 12 and AAC teams as you can, and then the Pac-12 is going to grab the best Mountain West teams and some of the Big 12 teams. So like you're looking at the Pac-12 grabbing Boise State, possibly TCU, Texas Tech, like teams like that to kind of add to their regional grab, maybe even an Oklahoma State if they want to reach that far, or even a Kansas State. But I think the Big Ten will look at it, or the Big Ten will look at it and say, well, let me go ahead and grab Kansas State because we already have Nebraska. Let me grab Iowa State because we already have Iowa, and then let me grab Cincinnati from the AAC.
Yeah.
And then you could have the ACC grab a Memphis, an Appalachian State, a Coastal Carolina, a West Virginia who's now open in terms of the development. So what I think is you're just going to see a bunch of people grab a bunch of random teams, and we're just going to have a bunch of super conferences. I think that's the only logical thing because a conference where your headliners, Iowa State, as good as they've been recently, they're not the money makers. And then what? If you add Boise State, they immediately become like the second best team in the conference.
Right. No, they do.
That's not a great look. And like I guess you could look into adding an independent like BYU or something like this. But overall, I think the Big 12 is done if this happens. And now this is a long way away, guys. There's a lot of things, and me and Brandon aren't going to speculate on whether it's going to happen or when it's going to happen. We're just talking about the what if of this and why this is such big news. And so, Brandon, let's get to our few storylines here. Which teams, this could be Big 10, this could be Big 12 teams, this could be SEC teams, would benefit the most from Texas and Oklahoma moving down south into the SEC?
Oklahoma State, I think, because they don't necessarily have to play. They'll still end up playing Oklahoma every season, like write it down, if they make the move. But they won't have to play Texas nearly as often, if at all. And in the SEC, I don't really know who wins because I don't know. You know, people like to be so quick to be like, oh, Texas and Oklahoma, once they get to the SEC, they aren't going to be able to compete. Why not? You know, there's seasons where Arkansas competes. Why can't Oklahoma, who's made multiple playoff appearances, compete?
Can I interrupt you real quick, man? Because here's what I want to say. This is going to piss a lot of people off. Unless the SEC fans, and listen, y'all see the jerseys. I'm an Auburn fan. Brandon's got the LSU shrine in the background and the Southern hat on. If your team is not Alabama or Georgia, please shut up.
Exactly.
Like, because guess what? Oklahoma's better than you.
Well,
right now.
Debate. Okay, right now, yes.
Right now, going into the season, if Oklahoma was in the SEC, they'd be projected to beat LSU, Auburn, Florida, Tennessee, Vandy, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and there's an argument to be made that they'd be ranked higher in the preseason poll than Alabama right now.
Right.
And Georgia. Brandon, there's people that would vote them first in the listen, this whole SEC elitist thing, like I saw a tweet, and I don't want to call anyone out because we've had them on the show. They're saying they'd be like fifth in the West. Shut up. You don't know a single thing about what you're talking about if you think Oklahoma's fifth in the West right now.
Every single person on this podcast knows who you're talking about. Every single one listening.
Like, and then this whole thing, like, Texas didn't want to play LSU. Shut up. Nobody's ducking LSU. I'm sorry, Brandon. Nobody's ducking LSU, bro.
You're very aggressive right now. No,
I'm just asking. Hang on.
Texas was not ducking LSU. It's a scheduling conflict. I get that. It's fun to make the jokes that they were, though. As an LSU fan, it's so much fun.
It's absolutely fun. But listen, I'm going to be real. Listen, LSU fans, we love you. No one's ducking a 5-5 team.
okay, 5-5, first time in over 20 years.
Okay, that's the most recent thing. Last time
we had a losing season. It's
listen,
but their most recent losing season was further away than any other SEC team's most recent.
That's fine,
season.
But guess what? You know what's most recent?
Really
your 5-5 season. Gus Malzahn had a better record than y'all last year. Y'all lost to
Missouri.
Hang on, time out. You guys lost to Missouri, and you think that Oklahoma's subpar.
That was a good game, Zach. I don't know if you watched it.
Bo Nix threw for 300 yards on you, and you think Oklahoma is less than you.
It's a pretty good quarterback. What do you say?
Okay, go ahead, Brandon. I just had to say that because I was so sick of the tweets from these SEC elitists thinking that Oklahoma would go 3-7 in the SEC. Shut your mouth. You don't know what you're talking about.
I think I saw a tweet as well, which the tweets are insane right now. Like, it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Talking about Texas would be a bottom tier team, which I don't think they would be. I think they'd probably be mid tier, and I think they'd compete every now and then. I think in a couple of years they'll be back in the mix, especially in the SEC, where they have the chance to grow and they have even better of a national brand than they currently have. Oklahoma, for sure, because Oklahoma would be up there in the top. They'd finish, you know what, if we had conference realignment, which Zach and I kind of threw the idea around there, because with these two teams in the West coming in, we probably won't see what they did with Missouri and Texas A&M happen again, where Missouri's somehow in the East. That doesn't make any sense. They probably realign the divisions.
And also, Missouri and Texas A&M didn't have a rivalry coming in. I think a stipulation for Texas to join with Oklahoma is that you can't split them up.
Yeah, I could see that. I guess I think it's the cop-out thing to do would be to split them up and then have them as their cross-division rival. You know, that makes sense to me.
You see, a lot of the solution that a lot of people have been posting about is just to move Auburn and Alabama to the east, move Missouri back to the west, let Texas and Oklahoma into the west. But then, and I mean, I guess that could work, but at the same time, man, the East at that point, Brandon, because I think LSU and Oklahoma and A&M will probably be the top teams in the West. Man, what about the East, though, with Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia? And, I mean, we're talking about such a superpower comp. Like, gosh, man, the SEC championship would be ridiculous every year.
Yeah, so I thought about one more loser while we've been talking right now. And I think that's Texas A&M, because they kind of left the Big 12. This is the big joke when they left the Big 12, that they were trying to escape Texas and playing them every season. Now they're going to have to do it again, probably. So that's maybe an L. I don't know.
I like it. I'm so happy that rivalry could come back.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was a fun game. That was a very fun game.
That has to come back. So if you have this happen, you get the reinvigoration of you get the Red River Shootout, or whatever you want to call it, to the SEC, Brandon. How huge is that for that to be a SEC game? You get Texas A&M as a rivalry game. The Iron Bowl moves to a SEC East deciding game. Then you have Alabama, Tennessee, both in the East, so that doesn't have to be a cross division game. And then you also have Auburn, Georgia being in the same division for the first time in a long maybe ever. I don't think they've ever been in the same division, but they might have been way back in the day. But that's the oldest rivalry in the SEC. So the only thing I could see preventing that from happening, Brandon, is LSU and Alabama saying that they don't want to lose it. But if you move the Iron Bowl and Alabama, Tennessee into the same division, LSU, Alabama could be a cross division game.
That's true.
So it makes the most sense. I mean, really and truly, because then LSU and A&M would be in the same division. So you wouldn't have that. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, for me, though, the biggest factor is going to be, what does the Big 12 do, and how hard do they push to keep them? Because they should be murdering everybody to try to keep Texas and Oklahoma in there. And then also, I think it's going to come down to, this could be the start of super conferences. Everyone's been hit, Brandon, we've been doing this podcast, 3 years, and we've had super conference talk since we started it. Listen, if Texas, Oklahoma goes to the SEC, it's over. everybody like it's almost like you have like all this snow sitting around and you pull just the right rock and you got an avalanche. We're gonna have an avalanche of conference realignment if this happens.
I agree with you.
I like it. But guys, we appreciate y'all tuning in, man. Late on this Wednesday night, we had to break this news. Make sure to check out our interview with Demetrius Taylor from Appalachian State tomorrow, man. Dropping. And it was so awesome having him on. We even got to see his new twins on the show, man. But yeah, so check that out. Subscribe now. Like this podcast, man. We appreciate any and all support, man. Y'all are the best fans out there. But for B-Dub, myself, and the Blue Bloods, man, we are out.